in protecting my friends, I even ended up in a couple of fistfights during my time in college. One of which had me jumping off of a second-story balcony with a pair of brass knuckles in hand and savagely pummeling into unconsciousness some thug who had struck one of my friends just outside the doors of the party we had been attending. The police got called, the guy was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and I got cited for and fined for unsanctioned fighting within city limits. And the thing that killed me the worst this whole time was that I knew I was messing up. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tough Love Testimony Series. My name is Eric Rolon, and this is my testimony. I hope you find it uplifting and encouraging. Additionally, if you've been following the series and you feel like sharing your testimony, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to get it heard on here, maybe even have you on the channel to discuss it. So please feel free to email that to me at thetoughlovepodcast@gmail.com. You'll find the link in the description box down below, as well as right there on the screen. As I'm fond of saying, the words of a person's testimony, which are the events leading up to their conversion, and then those taking place after, as we all have a Christian walk, those words are often just as compelling as the scriptures themselves. And if Matthew 5:16 has anything to say on the matter, we are to let our light shine before men that they may see our good deeds and praise our Father who is in heaven. So let's encourage and empower each other together. Be sure to smash those like and subscribe buttons. Follow me over on Rumble as well. If you feel like donating, you can check out my locals page. And hey, I finally have some merch. You'll find all my links right on down below in that description box. All right, let's jump into this one. So, I grew up in the church. Much like my friend Stuart Davis, who I recently had on the show, I fall into the category of Christian you could call cradle Christians. Not that I was saved from birth or anything like that, but that I was a part of the church from my earliest days out of the womb into my adulthood. My family and I, we attended an Assemblies of God ministry church in Illinois, and it is a very, very charismatic sect of Christianity. Officially, when I was 3, I gave my heart to God. My church had this visiting faith-based circus performing group that came on one Sunday night, and there was clowns, there were talking flowers, there were puppets, magic tricks, balloon animals, music, all sorts of fun things for the kids. And woven into the events of the night was this biblical message that was followed by an altar call that one of the clowns gave for any of the children who wanted to give their life to Jesus. And when he asked, who would like to come on down here to the front of the pulpit and pray and receive Jesus to be their personal savior, my hand was the first to shoot up into the air. And I went down to the front alongside a sizable number of other children, including my best friend at the time, who was the pastor's son. We all prayed our little sinner's prayer together, and then we returned back to our seats to the applause of our adoring parents. And I know I didn't understand, and I'm sure most of my friends didn't understand much about the commitment that we had just made to God in that moment at that age. All we really understood was that, hey, there's this beautiful place called heaven, and I'm gonna go and live there one day with my mommy and my daddy and my little brother and Jesus, and it's gonna be awesome. That's all I really understood, and I'm sure that's all my little friends knew as well. I'm gonna go live there with my siblings, and mommy and daddy and grandma and grandpa are gonna be there. Naturally, my family and I, because of how involved my parents were, we attended church on a pretty regular basis. My parents, they served within the church and were both part of the praise team. My father actually was a praise and worship leader, and he helped to run the soundboard as well and did a number of different things behind the scenes. He was also on the board of elders, and my family had a really close relationship with the pastor and his family too. So we were there every single Sunday for the 2 morning services and then for the evening service. And then we also attended on Wednesday nights for corporate Bible study. And I faithfully attended Sunday school and children's church and learned all about the great stories of the Bible and all the great people in it, like Adam and Eve, Noah and the ark, Jonah and the whale, David and Goliath, and many more. There was even a Christian version of the Scouts called the Royal Rangers that I attended on Wednesday nights. So, needless to say, my family and I, we were all very, very involved in our church. As the years rolled on, I naturally slipped into a number of kid leadership roles in the various social circles that I was a part of. My brother and I, we were typically the tallest, fastest, and most physically fit kids out of any group of kids that were our own age. So we, along with several other boys and girls, were the popular kids. We had a lot of influence in the circles that we ran in. My brother and I, we were always picked first for any pickup games of football or basketball or soccer. If we happened to be playing outside during a Sunday evening at children's church, or if it was before church service when the praise team was busy practicing, other kids, they wanted to hang out with us. And we were also sought out by our Sunday school leaders to welcome new boys to the church. And the girls, same for them. If there were new girls that came in, they were sought out by the leaders as well to just welcome new kids in. Hey, help them make friends, introduce them to people, show them a good time, make it something that they want to come back and attend. Let's just love on them. We were told by our Sunday school leaders that other kids looked up to us and that we were role models in children's church. And so, minus the natural childlike antics that are just part of being an energetic kid, we all really took our roles on seriously. And if other kids saw us messing around and not paying attention, then they would do as we did. And if they saw us paying attention and participating in Sunday school conversations and activities and singing along with praise and worship, then they would do that too. And this is pretty much the way things went for me up until I was about age 14. My brother and I, we had helped out in Vacation Bible School. We both were in roles of leadership within Royal Rangers, our little scout program. And then we hit high school age, and things started to shift here. Once I turned 14 and was finally of high school age, I could start attending the youth group that was on Monday nights that my church offered. And this is where a lot of the friends that I had and knew and had grown up with started developing these cliques. And they became very exclusionary to those outside of their small circles. They were even exclusionary toward my brother and I. And it was so jarring to experience because up to this point, I was friends with just about every popular kid at church, even a lot of the unpopular ones. And me and the other popular kids, we made up the bulk of those that were attending youth group. I had spent a lot of time outside church with many of these kids. Everything from birthday parties, community sports, hanging out on the weekends at each other's house, sleepovers, you name it. However, my brother Ian and I, we were homeschooled up until high school. And most of the cliquey kids that we knew, they were attending the same schools with each other and attended a lot of the same functions. So there was this sort of extra bond established between them just out of daily proximity, and that far outweighed the small amount of time that we might get with them following a church morning service where they might come over and hang out at the house for a couple hours before we went back to church that night for the evening service. So this is how a typical Monday night at church would go. I would go and attend youth group. I'd sing along with the awesome praise and worship, and I'd sit with my friends during the sermon. Then, as soon as it adjourned, and we all had free time to mingle before heading home for the evening, I would just get stonewalled by the very people I just sat worshiping alongside of. And it's this kind of situation where everybody's talking about this one singular topic, And it could be a topic that you know a ton about. It could be a topic that you know everything about. Everyone's engaged in this natural flow of conversation about this topic. They're cracking jokes and they're razzing each other and everybody's laughing and carrying on. And the moment that I would try and enter conversation and speak to something that was said, people would just raise eyebrows at me as if to say, who the hell said you could talk? And then they'd either outright ignore me or they'd deride what I said and then just return right back to their conversations. Now, again, keep in mind, my brother and I could hang out with any one of these kids by themselves outside of church. But the moment that they were in their clique, they would treat us like we were nobody. And on top of that, there was this drama group at my church that almost all of my friends had joined. And because I was homeschooled and because my family spent so much time at the church, the bulk of the friends that I had were just those that I attended church with. I didn't really have secular friends, if you will. Most everybody that I knew and that my folks would have over to the house for dinner, they were people that were part of our church. And when everybody joined this drama group, this just added another layer to their bonds that I couldn't surmount. I had been asked to join their group a number of times, but I had refrained because something just seemed off. And it was weird. Like, there was this weird vibe about the whole thing. And after seeing how my friends had all come to behave, I would get this really unsettled feeling when I even thought about it. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was something there. And they would worship, again, seemingly with their whole hearts. And then as soon as service was over, they would just behave like a bunch of worldly high schoolers, gossiping, making fun of others, making rude or snarky comments, and generally acting like a bunch of jerks. And these same people, they would behave this way, and then they'd go on one of these total immersion God encounter weekends like Acquire the Fire or The Ramp, and then they'd come back to church the following Sunday all fired up and gung-ho about their relationship with the Lord. And they would just be continuously quoting the main talking points from the sermons that they heard at these weekend encounters. They'd be rattling off the few memory verses that they'd picked up as well. And they'd be acting like they had attained some sort of Christian nirvana. They would make all these declarations about how they were going to change their lives and they weren't the same person that they were before they went on this weekend. And for a couple weeks, they all acted as though there had been this genuine change that took place in their lives. But then, very soon after, they were right back into the same wretched modes of being and clique-driven nonsense. And because of this, I stopped attending youth group altogether. Despite being involved in church, my friends really didn't seem to be living for God. Not with their actions, anyway. And not for nothing, but at this point in my life, I wasn't walking as closely with God as I should have been either. I didn't read my Bible with any kind of regularity, and I really only got my scriptures and the few passages that I would commit to memory from the pulpit on a Sunday morning. I was one of those Christians that got that small clutch of verses, 2 fast songs, 1 slow song. We all do communion. We go home. Re-up for the week. I'll see you next Sunday. I was falling into that same exact mode of behavior. Thing is, though, I have always known where I stand with God, and I knew that I wasn't walking closely to Him like I should have been. I knew that my heart was jaded and really starting to become walled in, but I also didn't pretend to be some ultra pious person either. I ended up going to Acquire the Fire because I wanted to see what all the hullabaloo was about. And it was like any other intense worship weekend. I just wanted to see what the big deal was, and I enjoyed the praise and worship. I enjoyed the sermons. I was prayed over a lot that weekend. Spent a lot of time thinking about my walk with God. But when all was said and done, I didn't feel like some big monumentous thing had taken place. It just felt very normal. I felt like me, and I just carried on like I always did. I could quote the scriptures. I could grapple with others in some capacity or another intellectually when it came to questions of God and the church and the Bible, but I still didn't press in to really know my Heavenly Father, at least not in the way that I had in those early years up to age 14. Now, at this point, I'm no longer attending with any kind of regularity the Monday night youth group. I would go every now and then just to see if things were different. They never were in terms of that clickiness. And so after I think a couple more tries going back, I just said, hell with it, I'm done. So when I get to high school age, my brother and I, we actually started attending regular school. And it wasn't like regular public school. First, we went to this Christian private school. And then after 2 years of that, we transferred to my town's local high school. And that's the point that I just let the world in. I became far too conscious of what the world thought of me. I put on all the masks and became very much a people pleaser. And it was much to my own detriment. I let the world really dictate to me what things I should be into, like music, sports, girls, theater, drama club, video games. I let my cues be given to me directly from the world, and people that I seemed almost desperate to please and garner as friends, and that wore me out. Rather quickly, I realized that I was getting carried away with that same superficial crap that much of my church friends had gotten carried away with. And once I realized this, I decided I just wanted to do my time, enjoy the sports and the clubs that I was a part of, and do my best not to get caught up in any more of that ridiculousness that being stuck in a building with a bunch of hormone-addled know-nothings is. So I tried to keep my head down and just get through it. Without realizing it, I had become much like those in my youth group, a whitewashed tomb. And I hated that fact, but I didn't necessarily make any moves to change it. The only difference between my former youth group friends and myself was that I would still talk to whoever was friendly with me. If you were cool with me, I was cool with you. And this was regardless of what clubs my friends were a part of. This was regardless of whatever circles they ran in. I could talk to anybody. I developed that actually pretty early on, and so it served me pretty well in just being friendly with people. Now, even out of all the kids that I knew back in youth group, it wasn't like every single one of them had completely shut me out. I still had at least 3 friends from there that I could still spend some real quality time with. One of them being my best friend, again, the pastor's son. And there was, of course, I had some friends from high school too, naturally from the drama group and then the vocal jazz group that I was a part of that I could also spend time with. But beyond those few friendlies that I held most close to my heart, I really looked on most of my classmates and most of the kids that I knew, even at church, with a great deal of contempt. And I cleaved to this old adage that was supplied to me by one of my friend's fathers. And that was that life starts after high school. And boy, was he right. So the summer of 2006, I kind of pulled back even further from even the select few people that I had been spending time with. And following my graduation, I stopped attending church with any kind of regularity. I started chasing girls, and I gave up my V-card. And I didn't really balk at the significance of such an act, losing one's virginity. I was in this mode of doing what felt good. And the way I looked at the day that I actually lost my virginity was like this. I woke up in the morning a virgin, and I went to bed that night not a virgin. I was in this pursuit of pleasure, and I was so over the people that I knew from class and church. And I didn't care, really, genuinely didn't care if I ever kept in contact with the people that I had known for so many years. Save for, again, that very small clutch of people that I still had held on to. And even them, I ended up excising a few from. So I had really come to just be so irritated that I'd been such a people pleaser before that in response to that, I became just a selfish prick. I would go on to college where in the fall I met a Christian gal in my freshman year in art class, and we dated all throughout college. And at this time, that's when I started drinking alcohol, occasionally watching pornography, and became very sexually driven. When I thought about how far I'd fallen from where I had started out in the church, I found myself feeling a lot like the narrator from Fight Club after he beats the bejesus out of Angel Face. And his alter ego, Tyler Durden, asks him, "Where'd you go, psycho boy?" And he replies with, "I felt like destroying something beautiful." I wanted to do the things that I wanted to do, and everyone else's desires came second to mine. My selfishness continued to manifest in the forms of being very, very brazen and cavalier, as if the sun just radiated out of my smile. Save for when it came to looking after my friends. I naturally gravitated to a leader in my friend group, and I settled into the role of protector. I had embraced this extreme sense of justice from as far back as I could remember. Like, my favorite movies were Indiana Jones, were Star Wars, and then anything hero related where there was this very clear-cut good versus evil. Like, I had that hero complex for sure. And because of our size and our ability, my brother and I, we were always the protectors out of our various friend groups. If a bully was ever picking on one of our friends, all our friend had to say is, "I'm telling Eric and Ian," and the bully would just panic and beg them not to, with promises to leave them alone. And if the bully persisted in their bullying, then I, my brother, or the both of us would just expeditiously sort them out. And so I recognized that I had this violent, rage-filled darkness inside of me. And much like a darkly dreaming Dexter, I called it my dark passenger. In protecting my friends, I even ended up in a couple of fistfights during my time in college, one of which had me jumping off of a second-story balcony with a pair of brass knuckles in hand and savagely pummeling into unconsciousness some thug who had struck one of my friends just outside the doors of the party we had been attending. The police got called, the guy was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and I got cited for and fined for unsanctioned fighting within city limits. And the thing that killed me the worst this whole time was that I knew I was messing up. I felt convicted with every single wrong step I took, but I refused to allow the Holy Spirit to correct me. And to quote In the Light by DC Talk, I was the king of excuses, and I had one for every selfish thing that I did. I went on to graduate college with a BFA in illustration in 2011, and as a direct result of my selfish ways, my girlfriend and I ended up splitting up shortly thereafter. She was much better off without me in her life, and I knew it. And for a brief period of time, sense returned to me following that breakup, and I ended up reaching out and apologizing to her for all my self-centeredness during our time together. And she forgave me, and we bid each other adieu. Now, after splitting up with my longtime girlfriend, I decided to just throw myself into work and pursuing a career in acting. I had been involved in theater and stage acting since I was 4, and had even participated in an acting internship with Walt Disney World the year before I graduated college. And it was a skill that came in handy at the Ruby Tuesday that I was waiting tables at. Now, at this point, I still wasn't attending church with any kind of regularity. But I had learned not to be so selfish, undoubtedly through the Holy Spirit's convictions. But the only problem was I was still partying on the weekends and living a promiscuous lifestyle. And that's awful. I recognize that is so awful. And I used to jokingly say that I was the worst person I knew. And looking back on my life, I really do believe that was once true. Again, I got a bit fed up with my own wanton behavior and my inability to exercise my self-control. About the only thing that I was actually disciplined in was in working out and working on my acting craft. At this point, it's now October 2013, and I felt this need that I had to get a change of pace and a change of scenery to just help me get back on track emotionally. And now that I had no steady relationship, I was completely untied from anything beyond family keeping me in Illinois. So, following a trip out to help a friend move out to Tennessee, I returned home, packed my bag, and then moved to Spring Hill, Tennessee to be her roommate. I decided that I was done with the person that I was and that I was leaving him behind to go start this new life and hopefully be revivified. My life in Illinois had become just this chaotic mess. And once I was out of there, I was not going to let my life descend into that same chaos again. Boy, was I wrong. I never addressed my damaged heart. And somehow I thought I wouldn't just fall back into the same mistakes again. Almost instantly, I was right back into the same modes of behavior that had me feeling so broken and empty back in Illinois. I would wear this prim and proper mask like Dr. Jekyll during the day at work, and then at night, I would turn into Mr. Hyde. I was right back to sleeping around, partying on the weekends, and making an overall fool of myself. I did, however, get into an excellent talent agency in Nashville, and I started booking gigs here and there. So that was a bonus as far as entertainment work was concerned. Now, being an entertainer, pretty much all of us are either waiters or bartenders. So as I was making my way through this series of waiting jobs, I made a friend who ended up inviting me to a Bible study at the church that he attended. And I hadn't been to a service, let alone a Bible study, in a long time, and I decided to go. Very quickly, I established myself as one who knew the Bible on account of the verses that I had memorized and the pastors that I could quote. But I was still living this double life the whole time. I did feel the conviction of the Holy Spirit working within me, though, and little by little, I felt healing taking place inside my heart. The men in my small group, they genuinely liked me and they cared about me. And they valued what I had to say and they prayed over me. And I had this sense of belonging. And I hadn't had that genuine sense of belonging like this at church in a very, very long time. Very long time. Probably it had been at least 4 to 5 years since I really felt that genuineness. So I started attending a regular Sunday service at this church as well. And I finally cracked my Bible after not touching it for so long. And at this point, things started to really look up. I got back into being creative. I started doing tutorial videos on my YouTube channel that taught people how to make suits of Halo armor from the Halo video game series. I even went as far as to go to Nashville Comic-Con as Halo's main man, Master Chief. And that's where I met a girl. And all at once, it was like someone hit me in the head with a brick. All my good sense just fled. And I reverted right back into this worldly jackwagon. The gal in question was not a Christian, and I started dating her almost immediately. And then we moved in together after a month of knowing each other. She even helped me secure a job at the same unemployment firm that she worked at. I still attended my men's group, mind you, but kept my ruinous decisions a secret from all of them. As far as they knew, I was an accountable young man who loved the Lord and could reason like a philosopher about the goodness of God. And if you're guessing that this whole thing turned out badly, you are absolutely correct. Very, very quickly after moving in together, everything went pear-shaped. Everything. The relationship just descended into absolute madness. Sparks flew, and we constantly butted heads and fought. Oh man, I was severely unequally yoked to a histrionic nightmare and realized that I had to break it off with her. And what made things worse was that one of my best friends from Illinois, whom I had convinced to move out to Nashville under the pretext of working at the same unemployment firm, had recently moved in to be our roommate. Good sense just came crashing back into me yet again, and hat in hand, I sat down with him one night and I told him that I was breaking it off with my girlfriend and that we had to go. I felt like the biggest piece of garbage and promised to foot all of the moving expenses since it was my fault that we were in this mess in the first place. And so that week I informed my girlfriend that our relationship was over and she went nuclear. I'll spare you the details, but following my desk being trashed when I went back into work the following day, I quit my job with zero notice that day, and I raced home to pack up my friends and my belongings. I informed my folks of the situation at hand, and my father and brother graciously made the last-minute trip out to Nashville that very day with a pickup truck and got my buddy and I the hell out of there. If I apologized for my foolishness once, I did it 100 times. I hated myself for being so blind and so stupid, and I vowed to never compromise to such an obnoxious level ever again. That was a rough month. It was a rough 2 months. That took place over a 2-month span. Me getting into this relationship, my best friend moving in, everything going completely pear-shaped, and then us getting out of there. That was over a span of 2 months. And I thought that was the worst it was going to get. But over the next month was a series of brutal lessons in pain and grace that I would never and will never ever forget. So, after leaving the apartment that we were renting, my friend and I were officially homeless for 11 days, which is sweet. Graciously, my former roommate, she let us couch surf at her place. And her mother, who was also staying with her, was so awesome. She owned and I believe still does, owns a cleaning service. And so she helped my buddy and I fine-tune our resumes while she ended up hooking us up with odd jobs for the service that she ran, for cleaning out hotels, apartment buildings, airports. We would come in behind the crews that were there, either fitting out the rooms, doing all the molding and doing the plaster, and we would chip chunks of plaster off the sink. We would sweep everything up, vacuum it up, and just make it look like it was ready to be lived in. She demanded we were up every single day at 7 a.m. She'd have coffee ready for us. We'd have a quick breakfast. And then it was, okay, boys, you're sitting down. I want you submitting 5 resumes minimum every single day. And we would work like mad from like 7:30 till 12. And she would be over our shoulder, helping us reword things, rewrite rewrite things, fine tune any little minute detail that might help us with whatever job that resume was going out to. And then at 12, she'd break for lunch for us, and then we'd be right back at it at 1 o'clock, and we'd work till 5. That was really awesome. That was just an incredible experience of the grace of people towards us. Like, not just my former roommate for letting us live there, but her mother as well. Like, the two of them. I'm not going to say their names, but if you're watching this, you know who you are. Thank you so much for your kindness. Because her mother actually, in the evenings after we were done working, she would take us out for a burger and a Coke, or take us out for a steak, and like treated us like we were kings. And that was amazing. I was so undeserving of that. My buddy, though, like, he deserved all of that because I put him into the horrible position. But it was amazing. So we carried on like that for a few days. Wake up, throw resume out there. Lunchtime, resume. Dinner, work the odd jobs every couple of days. And then really quickly, I was able to secure a job at a sign shop and a place for my friend and I to live. I still felt so bad about everything that had happened that I insisted my friend sleep in my bed and I slept on the air mattress. And I start working at the sign shop as a digital designer, but quickly I end up shifting into fabrication, which I enjoyed much more. I love working with my hands. We each had our own workstation, and there was plenty of time to sit and to think or listen to music. And I didn't know what else to do, so I would pop in my headphones and I listened to He Reigns by the Newsboys and My Glorious by Delirious on repeat all day, every day. And I'd read my Bible during my lunch breaks, and I would pray as I was going to and from work. I'd even started talking to a Christian girl named Kylie, who had been encouraged by a mutual personal trainer to reach out to me. Kylie, she would later on go on to be my wife. And I was slowly getting into this better headspace, and I felt my heart condition improving. But I was not done taking my lumps. This has only been like 13 days now into this month of lump taking. 2 weeks after I start the new job, while I'm sleeping one night, someone hit my car that I had parked out in front of our house. Instead of parking it in the driveway, we had a really steep drive, and I would always bottom out, backing out. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to park in front of our mailbox, because I'm leaving early in the morning anyway, and just avoid scraping the undercarriage. And I don't know how the person managed to drive away, because they left their bumper in my front yard. There was antifreeze all over the ground, and they hit my car so hard that they pushed the trunk completely into the back seat and totaled it. Bent the frame all to hell. Undrivable. So, that was horrible. And despite them leaving the bumper in my front yard, the police never ever caught them. They never ever found out who did it. I still have no idea who did it. And that really, really sucked. And this stung even more so because I had just 3 weeks prior gotten my brakes done and put all this work into it. And now here it is, just a destroyed heap in front of my house. But since my friend still didn't have a job, he let me drive his car to work. And so this worked out fine until one day when his vehicle's brakes locked up on me in the rain, because I didn't know that his ABS system was disconnected, and I ended up crashing his car into another vehicle. Thankfully, it was just cosmetic damage, and it was like this slow-moving nightmare, because I was like 70 feet away from the vehicle in front of me, and I go to hit the brakes and the car just locked, and I'm sliding at maybe 20 miles an hour just towards this vehicle, and I'm trying to turn and the car is just staying right on track. I'm going, no, 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 no. Boom. Just kissed the back of this dude's bumper, crushed his bumper, crushed my buddy's front bumper on his car. But I was able to drive it home, and I had called my friend immediately following the crash to let him know what had happened. And so I finally pull into the driveway, and I shut off the car, and I just sat there and cried. My friend comes walking out of the house, told me to knock it off, that it was okay, and thankfully he had excellent car insurance, and the total cost for everything was just over $200, which I gladly paid. At this point, I had a total of $1.25 to my name in my bank account. I was quite literally reaching up to touch rock bottom. And yes, I do realize that I was living in Nashville. And yes, I realized that I was living out a country song. Fully aware of that. Thankfully, the bad things were over for a while. The following week, my friend's car was fixed, and he got hired on at the same sign shop that I was working at. So that was sweet. Now we could carpool, and I'd let him drive since I didn't have a vehicle. So if it got crashed, it was not my fault. Shortly after that, I ended up booking a couple of acting gigs that recouped a large chunk of the money that I had to spend in renting the storage unit that we had put all of our stuff in following getting out of our previous apartment. It also covered the fees that I had to spend in paying for my buddy to get his car fixed. I guess the insurance fees. My parents, they even blessed me with money enough to purchase a new car. So not new to me, but it was a used car, of course. But still, they blessed me with that money, and I am eternally grateful for that. And then the following month, so that was March. Now the following month, on April 1st, 2015, Kylie and I started officially dating. And next to my salvation in Jesus Christ, Kylie was and is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And when I was at the lowest point in my life, no less, her, my friend, and I all started attending church and Bible study regularly at the place that I had been attending just before I got into it with the wacko. Later that year, I would go on to propose to Kylie, and she said yes. Following this, Kylie moved in with my buddy and I am sure you are rolling your eyes at that statement, and trust me, I am well aware that that was not the wisest move. Cohabitating before marriage is a bad idea in general. Exceptionally bad if you are a Christian. So, yes, I was still living in sin, but by the grace of God, Kylie and I were married the following September in 2016. And she's my best friend. She was before and has only become more so now. And following our wedding, that following year, in January, we ended up making a move down to Dallas, Texas, to both pursue careers in entertainment. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." Now, this does not mean that they won't have a tryst with the world, but it does mean that wisdom and godliness that is on the inside of them will not let them enjoy that tryst with the world. This is the way it is for everybody who receives salvation. Before you have the Holy Spirit living inside you, you can enjoy living a sinful life. Sin feels good. But once you've been saved and are subject to the Holy Spirit's convictions on your heart, however, you can no longer derive any pleasure indulging in sin. The evil things you say and do, they might feel good in the moment, but as soon as that moment passes, understanding and conviction that you have put your foot out of bounds and shifted your path sharply towards chaos will gnaw at your insides like intense hunger pangs. You try it and see. So now, Kylie and I, we were living in Dallas, and things were up and down financially for her and I as we worked full-time in audiobook narration, which differs in payout from book to book. And we were also booking acting gigs through the Dallas agency that we had signed on with. Both of us got in the same agency, which is amazing too. It was an incredible agency. It's tough, though, to secure and ensure financial security when you're on the way up in the acting world, because there is such inconsistency with booking your gigs, and it makes your life unstable. Just the nature of the beast. It's also really tough to make any concrete plans to do anything when your schedule is just up in the air week to week. But by the grace of God, however, we had enough steady audiobook work to grant us time to pursue in earnest our acting careers, which I'm very grateful for. Not everybody gets that. A lot of people have to sort of make this prayerful leap into entertainment at the expense of losing out on a job completely, and they either make it or they fail and have to go back to work somewhere else. So I am very, very grateful for the time that we had. And we both were booking, thankfully, commercials and industrials through our agency. Industrials are like the training videos you see if you've ever worked for any big box store that you have to sit through for hours and hours at a time when you're in your onboarding. They're boring to watch, but they pay great if you're the one who's the digital personality training the person sitting on the opposite side of the screen. So we booked those as well as voice acting work at the biggest purveyor of English dubbed anime in the United States. And at the time, that was Funimation Entertainment. Now they're called Crunchyroll. For a time, things were pretty great. We found a local church to attend and a group of believers that were our age who also happened to be pretty cool and pretty nerdy. We shared a lot of the same interests, and we hung out pretty frequently. We also had a lot of friends and acquaintances in the acting world, and more specifically in the anime world. People wanted to get close to us because we were climbing the ranks rather quickly. This only increased when I started directing at Funimation. The unfortunate truth, however, was that we were only as valuable to many of the people that we knew as the work we could help them secure and the doors we could open for them. Superficiality is everywhere in entertainment. Everywhere. And I started feeling this ball of anxiety growing in my chest the more I worked at Funimation. In the middle of all this, I had started a Christian apologetics podcast on YouTube, following a conversation with an atheistic cousin of mine. And in this conversation, I was posed a number of questions about God and Christianity and the Bible that I didn't have complete answers to. And so I told my cousin that I wanted to answer his questions, but that I was going to need some time to research and study. And I wanted this time so that I could actually cobble together some sufficient answers. And so this set me off on an amazing adventure of biblical study. I learned so much. And over the coming weeks, I wrote research paper after research paper in response to my cousin's questions. And my answers were long and complex, and I hadn't initially intended them to be so. But in order to adequately answer the questions that had been posed to me, I had to run down these rabbit trails and address many interconnected things. And for those who haven't attempted to answer exhaustively a question that's been posed to you, let me tell you, it can be a chore. Because while it's easy to ask a question, it's often much more difficult to sufficiently answer said question. But it was a chore that I relished like a starved man at an all-you-can-eat buffet. I felt like my brain and heart would spark to life. and sparked to life like I'd never felt them before, as I made defense after defense of the Christian faith. And prior to this challenge, I had been making YouTube tutorial videos that, as I said before, were teaching people how to make props and suits of armor from video game series. And so I had this natural knack for teaching and explanation, which it served me really well on my channel, as I had over 1 million views on one video in particular. It wasn't a tutorial video, but it was what sort of directed people to my tutorials. So I was getting a lot of hits. And so in the following months and years, I would turn my lengthy answers that I was providing to my cousin into deep dive podcast episodes. And this served as my most treasured faith outlet as my wife and I continued in our entertainment careers. And it's no surprise that the most of the entertainment world is left, even far left-leaning. And while my colleagues on the left could enjoy any number of emotionally and politically driven conversations as they wanted to at Funimation, the environment and the people were much more hostile to those with conservative and Christian values. So here I am working day after day after day in anime, and then going home and working on a Christian podcast and just feeling like my soul is being ripped 2 directions. So most days I couldn't join in my colleagues' reindeer games, and I had to keep my mouth shut about most everything. And the careful watching of what I said developed into full-blown anxiety and full-blown worry that any little thing that I said was going to be misconstrued, and that as a direct result of that, I would end up getting just blacklisted and never be able to work again in anime ever. I would stress over conversations that I would have as I traveled to and from work. And I'd replay every single minute detail in my mind over and over. And I'd just be looking for anything that would be a red flag to people that I was a conservative or that I was too Christian for them. And suffice to say, I had, again, let the world dictate my marching steps, and I had again let myself become just far more concerned about man's opinion of me, and far too concerned that I would be barred from working in anime anymore than I was with actually being faithful and confident in Christ and in my Christianity. The stress got so bad that it ended up bleeding into my acting work as well. Not that it affected my performances, because my performances, like, some other part of me takes over and I just lock it down and it comes out naturally. But I'd find myself going over and over line reads from performances that I had just given in a voiceover session, as if I could fine-tune them somehow and make them better after the fact. And these were lines, mind you, that I'd already been told by my directors were perfect, or were great, or excellent. And it would be like, hey, that was great, or that was perfect, moving on. And that should have been enough for me. But no, here I was with just this knotted ball of anxiety, and it's just infecting every part of me. And there was no reason for this OCD anxiety, save for the root of it was nestled deep in my lack of spiritual honesty in my Creator and to my Creator. That anxiety ended up reaching its peak in 2020 as I went through a cancellation of my anime career, following a message of hope that I shared on my personal Facebook page about beating the Chinese coronavirus. And I was friends with many, many people in the anime and acting industry that when they saw my post, they freaked right the hell out that I could call the novel coronavirus the Chinese coronavirus, even after the media had been doing that very thing for weeks. I was labeled a racist. I was labeled the worst kind of racist because I couldn't see how racist I was. And almost overnight, the tap was just shut off on my anime career. Directing ended just as soon as I finished the current shows that I had been working on, and my anime acting career slowed to a trickle. I still booked the occasional role at another studio called Okratron 5000 that was affiliated with Funimation. They did a lot of video gaming work there as well, still do. But things were never the way they were pre-cancellation. And all because I dared to call a sickness by its place of origin. Just like the Rocky Mountain fever from the Rocky Mountains, or West Nile from the Nile, or Ebola from the Ebola River. It's amazing what identity politics can do to just wreck careers. What really hurt even more than just having my anime career canceled, though, was that my wife's anime career was canceled at the same time. She was guilty by association. And many of the friends that we knew and had hung out with, they just deserted us at this time. And our circle of friends tightened, significantly so. In the face of lockdowns and social distancing, I started an online Bible study with some friends from church and a few of the Christians I knew from within the anime world. And we embodied the sentiment of iron sharpening iron. I was done wearing masks, and from that point on, I made sure that those who associated with me knew exactly who I was and who I served. And my relationship with God was fully renewed, and my love for teaching the Bible was revivified. We ended up actually doing a fantastic study through the book of Proverbs, and then through the book of Acts, and then we were part of the way through Luke before Kylie and I were making our decision to get out of Dodge, as it were. Thankfully, after that first cancellation, things started to settle down a bit in Texas. And a year later, normality returned. I'm still doing the Bible study at this point. Unbeknownst to me, however, this conversation about me and the label that I gave the Chinese coronavirus was still going on in the industry behind my back. And I took extreme exception to this, because I was being painted out to be some sort of ignorant, racist monster. Additionally, I got further dogpiled on online when I dared to share support for Kyle Rittenhouse. And not just show support, but I shared a link to a video commentary on the trial that was being produced by Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law on YouTube. And this is where I went through a second cancellation. Now, Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, he had formerly gone really, really hard on Funimation with a series of investigative videos following the cancellation of a fellow voice actor named Vic Mignogna, most notably known for playing the role of Edward Elric in the Full Metal Alchemist series. Now, following my post of Nick's live stream of the Rittenhouse trial on Twitter, people in the anime world went nuclear. But I was finally done being a punching bag. I had hitherto not spoken about any of the goings-on from the previous year online. I hadn't tried to even make a defense of myself. I just tried to let it die, and I just tried to do my job, keep my head down. But now I took to social media and various podcasts that I was invited on to, and I just laid siege to the anime and acting world. And admittedly, I did so with a measure of malice that I should have honed and focused a bit more into righteous indignation than I did. And I make no excuses for anything I said as I waged this one-man war. My mind was made up, however, If people were going to make me out to be this monster, then I was going to show them just how monstrous I could be. I wanted to ensure that the only people that dared call me friend who were in my life were those who could handle naked truth. And it was time to excise the cancer. The rest of the hangers-on fled as I delivered salvo after salvo of truth missiles into the online aether. And sure enough, that constricted my wife's and my circle of friends even tighter. And even though I knew that my actions were going to ensure that I never worked in anime and video games in the places that I previously had ever again, I was fine with it. And so was she. I steeled myself to accept whatever outcome was to occur as a direct result of me speaking and acting truthfully. Now, shortly thereafter, darn near all of my wife's and my entertainment career prospects completely dried up. Notwithstanding our audiobook work, which we still had and still have by the grace of God. We held on to that and have maintained that. And that helped us to maintain the life that we had in Texas. But this was short-lived as we made a decision to move away from Texas. We wrestled with possibilities, and we landed on upstate New York, as that's where my wife is originally from. And we desperately wanted more financial stability, because it's very expensive living in major metropolitan cities, as I'm sure a lot of you well know. So yeah, we wanted some more financial stability, and we just needed some help with our now 1-year-old son, Christian. So at the end of May 2022, we made the move clear across the United States to upstate New York to start fresh, yet again. Now, once we arrived, I started applying everywhere and doing interviews for any job I could get my hands on. And thankfully, I found employment rather quickly, and I started climbing the ranks within the first 2 weeks of my employment, which was awesome. It was tough, though, going from full-time entertainment work to a regular 9-to-5 job. But I knew that God had presided over the whole ordeal, and it was His hand at work in my life and the lives of my family members that had carried us thus far, and I knew that He was going to lead me on. So as the next few months wore on, my family and I, we fell into this rhythm, and we were taken in by my wife's parents, God bless them, until we could find a place of our own. And there were times where I felt like a real failure about everything. There were times where I hated myself for how things had gone down in Texas. There were times that I raged and just beat my hands against the air in frustration over my lot. But I remembered the prayer that I made one day as I was headed to Funimation for one of my last recording sessions. And at that point, I had already fallen in love with biblical research, and I was struggling with my first cancellation and how I was going to carry on, torn between two great loves, one for acting and the other for biblical teaching. So in this prayer, I told God that I loved both, but that if I could only do one for the rest of my life, that I wanted it to be teaching His Word. I finished my prayer by telling God that if He wanted me in biblical research and teaching, then He was going to have to rip acting away from me. And that is exactly what He had done. Careful what you pray for. You just might get it. But that realization finally made that 18-inch drop from my head to my heart. And I decided to get serious with my faith. Really serious. I got back into my Bible on a regular basis and quickly read through it from cover to cover. I had only read through it one other time at this point in my whole life. And I started to focus back on answering those tough questions that face Christianity. And I started reaching out to those I admired in the Christian world with invitations to appear on my podcast and share about the Lord and about their work. I started putting more and more effort into creating biblically grounded and driven content, and started seeing exponential growth taking place in my own heart and soul. I finally understood what it meant to walk with God, as I was doing so and am doing so now on a regular basis. Now my family and I are in a house of our own. I'm a homeowner. We recently welcomed our daughter Isabel into the world. She is 5 months old now. And my faith is stronger now than it ever has been. It is. It's definitely stronger now than it's ever been before. My family and I, we belong to an amazing church family called New Testament Church. And more, I can see the hand of God at work in my life. And even when I look back, I see his purposeful hand and direction every step of the way through. Even when I wasn't living for him, it's like bumpers on a bowling alley lane. He was just keeping me from going down the gutter. I am sold out on teaching his word and fighting for the faith, and I always will be. Contending in the arena of truth and presenting my Lord and Savior to the masses in a real and tangible way has become the greatest joy that I could ever experience. I have a burgeoning online ministry, and I have no plans of stopping. God was kind to me when I did not deserve it. He never gave up on me, and he won't give up on you either. And that is my story thus far. It was fraught with pitfalls and blunders that were more often than not of my own creation. If anything that I've shared resonated with you, and you'd like to learn more about God and his ever-growing family, then I encourage you to dive into the Bible. If you've never read it before, and even if you have, start with the Gospel of John and read through to the end. Then go back to Genesis and start over. It will take you on such a tremendous ride, and it's going to acquaint you or reacquaint you with the Creator and lover of your soul, Jesus Christ. If you seek the Lord, your God, you will find him if you search after him with all your heart and with all your soul. So, my story isn't over, and neither is yours. Thanks for listening. If this meant something to you, and you feel you have a testimony to share as well, like I said at the top of this whole talk, please share that. Send it on over to that email that's on your screen right now. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to get it heard here, even if it's just reading it for my listeners to hear, possibly even having you on the show to talk about it. I hope that what you heard today was encouraging. I hope that if you've been in situations similar to what I've experienced, that you recognize that there is redemption, there is restoration and healing to be had. Like for King and Country's song, like they say in their song, it's not over yet. Even when you think you're finished, it's not over yet. So, be blessed and be a blessing. I've got some new and fun things coming you guys' way here real soon. Another huge deep dive series is actually going to be popping up here in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. Please smash all the buttons, check out the links down below. Be blessed and be a blessing, everyone. Take care.